Number 5 on this list is a mistake. So I know that's kind of weird. How do you discover a mistake? Well, in a story from One Dumb Diver, and yeah, that is their actual handle, they do just that. They write, "When I was 15, I took the family boat out and dove the reef myself to clear my head. That was mistake number 1. I was down at a depth of about 90 feet when I was only rated for 60. While diving, I spotted a 3.5 meter mako shark coming right at me. For those who are unaware, makos are basically the cheetahs of the ocean, and they only have 2 speeds. Curious, which is harmless, and lunch. This guy was in lunch mode, so I hovered, as I'd been trained to do since there was no way for me to escape it. Nowadays, we dive with shark shields which emit electronic pulses that freak the sharks out and keep them away, but back then, what we used was essentially a chainmail sleeve, the idea being that sharks hate the taste of metal, so if you give it your arm, it'll bite down, decide you're gross, and move along. So I wait, and it comes, and I make a perfect move to give it my arm. However, just before the crunch, it occurred to me that I'd left my sleeve on my bed. I had my knife drawn, however now I had a series of problems. I had a huge open gashing wound on my arm from the bite in open water and trailed blood everywhere. Once the shock wore off, you realize that you're in salt water, and salt water and open wounds, they don't feel too good. In a panic, I dropped my weight belt and shot up to the surface without any sort of waiting period. Because I hadn't been paying attention to the currents, I was approximately a quarter mile downstream of my boat, which means I had to swim up to it. So I end up racing back to shore with nothing more than a tourniquet to staunch the bleeding. Long story short, my series of unfortunate self-inflicted events earned me 172 stitches, boatloads of physical therapy because the shark had actually bitten down into my tricep and detached it, and easily identifiable scars on one of my arms for the rest of my life. So that story right there, folks, is why I personally don't think I'm ever going deep sea diving. I love sharks, they're super cool, I love to learn about sharks, but I am more than happy to keep them in a tank at the aquarium and learn about them in that way. Swimming with them or discovering one in front of you on the day that you also forgot your protective gear, not something that sounds like a great time. Number 4 on this list is a barracuda. El Herrera 9519 writes, "One time when my parents visited Mexico, they went diving and my mom was slightly lower down than my dad, looking at the ocean floor. My mom had on a gold necklace that was floating in the water around her. It was a sunny day and a fairly shallow dive, so it was sparkling. My mom looked below at all the critters when my dad grabbed her and started frantically shaking her arm to get her attention. She looked up, and a barracuda was directly in front of her, staring intently at the shiny necklace. She slowly moved up her hand to cover the necklace, and then slowly and calmly moved away from it, and it took off without bothering them anymore, but still pretty unsettling, and taught my mom to be a little bit more aware of her surroundings when diving." So I looked it up, and barracudas can grow to be 1.8 meters in length. Pair that with their extremely sharp teeth and the fact that shiny objects remind them of the little silverfish that they eat, and you have yourself in a pretty bad situation. The woman in this story is honestly extremely lucky that this fish waited to decide if it was going to attack or not. Most times she wouldn't have had time to respond, and it would have just gone to take a bite. Considering this necklace would have been around her neck, having a barracuda bite into it could have ended very badly. Number 3 on this list is a kelp forest. Duct Tape Jedi writes, "After a day of boat diving in Monterey Bay on the California coast, we had a night dive planned. I was there with 2 friends celebrating my birthday, and we were part of a larger group of divers. My friends were too tired for the night dive, and I was too, but I got invited to buddy with another diver whose friends also decided to stay on the boat. So I was following my new buddy through the kelp when some of it caught on my tank. I tried to pull clear but managed to get tangled even more to the point where I was unable to move. I kept shining my light around looking for my buddy, but he was nowhere to be seen. After what seemed like an hour but was possibly just a few minutes, I felt some of the kelp loosen up and then saw that my buddy was cutting it off with a knife. I was so exhausted after struggling that when we got to the surface, he had to tow me back to the boat." So discovering a full-on kelp forest, I mean, that would honestly be really cool, I think. Obviously, what happened to our diver would have been incredibly scary though. Having to wrestle for over an hour or however long he was there for with some kelp in the dark, probably thinking that you're going to drown, Doesn't sound great. But if you did discover a kelp forest and that didn't happen, then I think it'd be pretty sweet. If you're going to go though, then make sure you carry your own knife, because you wouldn't want to end up like our friend here. Number 2 on this list is a body. This story is from Texas Guy 911, and he says, I was diving in a local pond with a group of much more advanced cave divers than I was. I'm leading the dive as to get used to the pressures and responsibilities of heading the procession, and they're mentoring me. The known horrible visibility makes it impossible to navigate by compass, so we follow a line put by other divers. These lines go from one sunken item to another. So I know I'm about to hit a small sunken boat, but I don't remember which one. There are a few similar in a row in the same state of decay. I'm the first in the group, and I get to the boat, and I see someone's black army boots sticking out from the inner quarters. It looks somewhat new, not like items you find on the bottom. It's hard to see due to so much muck in the water. So I touch the boot, thinking it's by itself, but it won't lift, like it's attached to something heavy. I put my hand further in and feel the leg continuing out, pants, the calf, and now I see the second leg. I turn around and show a sign for the emergency ascend to the group behind me. Everyone has a sour face. Nobody wants to go to the surface, but it's a rule that if one says up, others in the group must abort, no questions. They wanted me to explain with signs why, but what's a diver's sign for a corpse? I feel like I rush toward the surface, even though I'm trying to stay calm and take time. So we're on the lake's surface. I have this adrenaline rush, can't breathe enough. So I tell them there's a body down there. I see rolling eyes from everyone once they see I'm serious. I describe in detail what I saw, and then we go down again. Once we locate it, we don't know if we should go forward or backward, as there are several boats on the line, and who knows in which boat the body is in and how far we drifted while taking it out on the surface. Well, we find all the boats before seeing the original one, of course. So our customary leader goes into the boat's cabin and we wait. I'd say he was rather courageous at this point. Then he emerges from the cloud of muck and tells us all to surface. So gluing information together from what we learned later on, it actually turns out the police or some other agency had body recovery training in the same lake the same day. When they went for lunch, they stuffed their fully dressed, anatomically correct rubber doll in one of the sunken boats for a few hours for safekeeping. So that didn't turn out to be an actual body, but I still think this would have been super scary. To feel a leg and then another leg in the darkness of the water like that on one of your first dives, I mean, that would be a lot. Maybe I'm just weak because deep sea diving is just not for me, but honestly, that would have scarred me for potentially life, whether the body is real or not. Number 1 on this list is a survivor. Off the coast of Nigeria roughly 8 years ago, a tugboat broke down and sank to the bottom of the ocean. 3 whole days later, a diving crew went out to the wreckage to see what was down there and recover the dead bodies. It was thought that no one could have possibly survived the crash and that all 12 people on the boat were dead. That's why the crew was so shocked when they found someone had actually survived. Maybe this doesn't seem as scary as finding someone who had died, but we're lucky enough to have the actual clip of them recovering this person and just watch as the hand comes out.
Alright, you found one, yeah? He's alive, he's alive.
The startled dive team discovered the tugboat's cook had survived for 3 days.
So that one image of having a hand reach out of the dark and stormy nothing would have actually terrified me. Not to mention that man who survived down there. That would have been 3 days by himself, surviving in this tiny air pocket, most likely believing that the world has left you for dead. This is definitely one of those scary discoveries that's for the better, because someone's life was saved, but as the Reddit user Edgar writes, I can't imagine how creepy and unexpected it would be to be on a mission to recover the dead and have a hand reach out to you like it did.
Number 5. Riley's tooth. 8-year-old Riley Gracely of Pennsylvania discovered something very, very old recently. Okay, come on, we know where this is going. It's a tooth, okay? He found a tooth, a very old tooth. Prehistoric tooth, and a prehistoric discovery to say the least, and that just happened last month in August. But he's no stranger to spotting fossilized teeth, of course, as the family makes it an annual getaway to get out, get some fresh air, and try and dig up the find of a century. The long extinct Carcharodontless angustidens, however, a megatooth brother species of shark who swam next to the infamous Meg species. During their visit to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Riley and his parents were excavating and fossil hunting at a very well-preserved, well-known fossil excursion near Somerville when the boys stumbled upon this perfectly preserved 5-inch extinct shark tooth. Dad had this to say: "We vacation in Myrtle Beach every summer, so from the time that Riley and his brother Colin could walk, we've been into searching for these treasures on the beach. Riley's collection is still in its early stages, so he's keeping it for now, but who knows, in time, it would be nice for others to enjoy it too." Aw, that's cool. The tooth was identified by the matching of cusps on each side of the tooth and DNA processing. Due to its shape and condition, the find is likely worth thousands of dollars. Collectors call it the find of a lifetime, but Riley Gracely said he's not too sure what he's gonna do with it yet. Buddy, I'm not gonna lie, sell it for college funds. Just trust me, 20 million year old cousin of the Meg? Auction house gonna take that off your hands, no problem. Number 4, royal teeth. As always, dudes, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, click that like button, help us out on our end, or throw a comment down below for us. Do you think this thing is still swimming around out there, or is this like long gone? The oceans are pretty big. When famous historian and biologist Sir David Attenborough visited the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge last month at Kensington Palace, he brought a very, very old surprise for their son, Prince George. I mean, what surprise doesn't this child already have, you know? Well, apparently a huge Megalodon tooth David found in Malta in the mid-1960s. And just make sure you take real good care of it. Oh, there it goes, and now it's broken. Seems all fun and outdoorsy, right? And a lovely present for our maybe once future king and other future king. But the Maltese government made a statement that made people think a little bit longer about this innocent gift. Reporters have brought to light the importance of historic valuables farmed and mined from the Malta area, and this is a perfect example of finders keepers. The Times of Malta reported that Culture Minister Jose Herrera said that he planned to get the conversation started on reclaiming the tooth from the young royal and returning it to Malta. Malta was a former British colony, so the fact that it could go on display among other treasures in the country's national collection is definitely worth considering. In the Middle Ages, many people believed shark teeth were magical talismans and called them tongue stones. Hundreds of years ago, shark teeth from Malta were among the very first fossils to be correctly aligned and interpreted as being related to the shark creature. That's pretty sick. And that's history right there, so we need to respect that. I'm not really sure how that's gonna work with things found in the water, like is it pirate code at the time, international water type stuff? Either or, I think it's a good conversation to have. If the treasures and archaeological finds are found in said country, pertaining to said people, is it said country's property? What do you think? Number 3, Megalodon 3D. Okay, so personally, I've never stood next to a Megalodon model myself. However, I have stood next to lots of yellow school buses in my life. And I know that it's just a bit bigger and a bit fatter than that. So, yeah, I get it. It was huge. But I don't really get it, you know? It's hard without depth perception. Well, lucky for us, the past few discoveries of sister species and bigger bones and teeth have nudged scientists in the direction of building a life-size model, complete to scale. Fully stocked, complete with jaws and bones and everything, just so you can visually picture how many actual human beings this thing can fit inside its mouth. Right in front of your 6-year-old. Just this last year, designers and computer biologists mocked up a rough 3D model and flirted with slapping it on together. Now, a pretty real Megalodon shark is now floating above heads at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. Researchers used a Megalodon vertebrae column from Belgium, a tooth from the US, and the contorum cranium, the cartilage equivalent of the skull from a great white shark, to help build this 3D model. Then they used a full body scan of a great white shark to estimate how flesh would then sit on a Megalodon skeleton. A team led by Jack Cooper, paleobiologist at Swansea University, used 3D modeling from a rare, well-preserved Meg spinal column to whiteboard some numbers about the shark's movement and behavior. A complete 3D model. By comparing the figure to modern sharks, they were able to understand better of the shark's swimming speed, stomach value, and calorie needs. We just learned about an entire animal we've never met from scanning microbes on a tooth. And now we have a giant model. Science rules. It would have been almost like 60 feet, weighing somewhere around 180,000 pounds. Why? Just why? Number 2, supernovas. It's a no-brainer that sharks are affected by climate change. Butterfly effect, you know? You take some algae out of the north and then some ant species in Lithuania starves, which makes someone else starve. It's called the ecosystem. And sometimes anomalies happen that alter and change that for us without our consent. as in mass coronal ejections. Basically, terrifying solar flares that mess up our atmosphere. And this actually might have been one of the reasons that this ancient mommy shark is no longer with us. About 2.6 million years ago, an oddly bright light arrived above a prehistoric sky and lingered there for weeks and months. It was a supernova, some 150 light years away from Earth. A new study suggests that within a few hundred years, well after the supernova had faded from Earth, a tsunami of cosmic energy from that star explosion reached our planet. The rain of particles showered our atmosphere, and the researchers say touching off climate change and triggering more of a mass extinction of everything large in the ocean, including our friend here, the Megalodon. In the Journal of Astrobiology, Adrian Mellett, a professor of physics and astronomy at the University of Kansas, said that recent papers about ancient seabed deposits of iron isotopes provided evidence and backed up the timing and distance that the specific supernova had. 36% of the largest marine animals like sharks, whales, turtles back then all disappeared. The extinction was concentrated in coastal waters where larger organisms would have caught greater radiation from the cosmic muons. They think basically the bigger the creature was, the bigger the increase of radiation would have been. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, what could have killed this thing off? It was top dog, it should still be around, right? It couldn't have run out of food. It's not like they were hunted out of extinction. Just when science is terrifying, it has a way of balancing things out, doesn't it? With something way more terrifying, like a star exploding. And number 1, relocation. Okay, so apparently sharks keep it the same for like millions of years, and then all of a sudden just pull a fast one on us. Like, saltwater sharks in history have been known to just wash up in like Lake Erie all of a sudden. If you've seen the news or Twitter recently with the amount of disaster floods we have right now with Hurricane Ian in Florida, apparently it's blowing sharks everywhere. This is kind of harmless, and I'm sure they're going to end up back where they belong. But Arctic deep sharks are now being found in the Caribbean. Hey Kyle, it's a shark, what's the big deal? They have a routine, people. They stick to one area and habitat for like zillions of years. We're in a weird twilight zone right now where sharks are ready for an upgrade. Apparently the size of the sharks in the past couple of years have grown a couple inches as well. That's like us losing 2 toes all of a sudden for evolution's sake. It's not normal. It's not just like calories in, calories out type deal. Their body needs to adapt. For example, Greenland sharks are the longest living vertebrates in the world, capable of living up to 400 plus years. That puts us back to about 1572 when Queen Elizabeth I was ruling, when these things were born. This past spring, scientists were able to get up close and personal with said Greenland shark, but found it just off the coast of Belize. Finding anything thousands of miles from its usual hunting grounds is unusual, but an ancient frigid water-dwelling shark in shallow, hot Caribbean water? It's a little concerning. Devanshi Kasana, a marine biologist at Florida International University within the Predator Ecology and Conservation Lab, first thought that what she was looking at was a 6-gill shark, which is known to live in the really deep warm waters. Nope, a shark from the other side of the globe, just enjoying a hot bath, swimming. So are they evolving? Like, what's happening here? The 400-year-old cold shark just decided it wants to mix it up, I guess. Horrifying. Horrifying on all counts.
Coming in at 5, Umabozu. Umabozu is a paranormal phenomena or yokai from Japanese folklore. Little is known of the origin of Umbozu, but it is a sea spirit and as such has multiple sightings throughout Japan. Typically, Umbozu appears to sailors on calm seas, which quickly turns tumultuous, either breaks the ship on emergence or demands a bucket or barrel from the sailors and proceeds to drown them. The only safe way to escape an Umbozu is to give it a bottomless barrel and sail away while it is confused. They appear and disappear in the oceans, often at night, and it is thought that they would suddenly appear on what was previously a calm sea surface as a giant black bozu head and destroy ships. In the Tohoku region, there is a custom of sacrificing to the gods the first fish caught when fishing, and it is said that if this is not followed, Nambozu would appear and destroy the boat and kidnap the boat owner. They are also said to change their appearance, and in Kesanuma, Oshima, Miyagi Prefecture, there are tales of them shapeshifting into a beautiful woman and engaging in swimming contests with humans. Odd. Outside of Japan, they are half-human legends about sea monks and sea bishops related to the Umbozu. Coming in at number 4, Ikuturso. Ikuturso, meaning the eternal Tursu, also known as Ikutursas, is a malevolent sea monster in Finnish mythology. As of now, Miraculous means octopus in Finnish, named after Ikuturso, but originally Turus is an old name for walrus. This aquatic creature's appearance remains unclear, but he is described with several epithets. Partalainen, the one who lives on the brink, or alternatively, the bearded one. Tuonenhaka, the ox of Tuoni death. Tutapa, thousand head. Tuhatsavi, thousand horned. It was also sometimes said that he lived in Pohjola, but that could also be because Pohjola was believed to be home of all evil. In some cases, Ikuturso is mentioned as the father of diseases, with Leviathan, the blind daughter of Tuoni, the god of death. In the world of Lovecraft, the Ikuturso was a great old one who ruled over the area of Finland until he, alongside the other old ones, was sung into the swamps by Finnish sages and poets, who had learned these abilities from the Sami people. Around the 1930s, author Mats W. Cornelius, who was a correspondent of H.P. Lovecraft, wrote stories in which he compared Ikuturso with the great old one Cthulhu. The creature is mentioned several times in the Finnish national epic. Kalevala, I quote, "From the ocean rose a giant mighty Tursa, tall and hairy, pressed compactly all the grasses that the maidens had been raking. When a fire within them kindles and the flame shot up to heaven, till the windows burned to ashes, only ashes now remaining. Of the grasses raked together in the ashes of the windows, tender leaves the giant places in the leaves he plants an acorn. From the acorn quickly sprouting grows the oak tree tall and stately. From the ground enriched by ashes newly raked by water maidens. Spread the oak tree's many branches, rounds itself a broad corona, raises it above the storm clouds. Far it stretches out its branches, stops the white clouds in their courses. With its branches hides the sunlight, with its many leaves the moonbeams, and the starlight dies in heaven." Coming in at number 3, Kieran Crowan. Kieran Crowan was a large sea monster in Scottish Gaelic folklore, famous from one specific saying, I quote, "7 herrings a salmon's fill, 7 salmon a seal's fill, 7 seals a large whale's fill, 7 whales a Kieran Crowan's fill." Local folklore say this huge animal can disguise itself as a small silverfish when fishermen come in contact with it. Other accounts state the reason for the disguise was to attract its next meal. When the fisherman would watch it in its small silverfish form, once aboard it changed back to the monster and ate him. The creature has a typical water dragon or serpent shape that is vicious and terrifying, consuming anyone who crosses its path. Also, sorry this point was so short, it's literally because Kieran Crowan has no information about it. You can check. Coming in at number 2, Ningen. Over the past few years, rumours have circulated about the existence of Arctic humanoid lifeforms known as Ningen, inhabiting the icy waters of the Antarctic. It has reportedly been observed multiple times by crew members on whale research ships, and these so-called Ningen, meaning human, are said to be completely white in colour with an estimated length of 20 to 30 metres. Other eyewitnesses described them as having a human-like shape, often with legs, arms and even 5-fingered hands. Other times they are described as having fins or a large mermaid-like tail instead of legs, or even tentacles. Now the only visible identifiable facial features are the eyes and mouth. According to one particular account, crew members on deck observed what they thought was a foreign submarine in the distance. When they approached, however, it became clear from the irregular shape of the thing that it was not man-made, it was alive. It then disappeared under the surface of the water. These Ningen stories garnered attention, with an article being printed about the Antarctic humans, with the article speculating on the possibility of unidentified creatures inhabiting the southern sea. Sadly, to date, no solid evidence has been presented to confirm the existence of the Ningen. Sightings still occur to this day though, most frequently at night, making them all the more difficult to photograph. Whether they are dangerous, we have no idea, however they are absolutely terrifying to look at, which is why they make it to number 2. And finally coming in at number 1, Leviathan. The Leviathan is a sea serpent monster of immense size from Jewish belief, referenced in the Hebrew Bible and the Book of Job, Psalms and the Book of Isaiah, and the Book of Amos. The Leviathan of the Middle Ages was used as an image of Satan, endangering both God's creatures by attempting to eat them and God's creation by threatening it with upheaval in the waters of chaos. St. Thomas Aquinas described the Leviathan as the demon of envy, first in punishing the corresponding sinners. It is also classified as one of the 7 princes of hell, corresponding to the 7 deadly sins. In Judaism, sources describe the Leviathan as a dragon who lives over the sources of the deep, and who, along with the male land monster Behemoth, will be served up to the righteous at the end of time. I quote, "The sea monsters, the great fish in the sea, and in the words of the Agada, this refers to the Leviathan and its mate, for he created them male and female, and he slew the female and salted her away for the righteous in the future. For if they would propagate, the world could not exist because of them." According to sources, the body of the Leviathan, especially his eyes, possesses great illuminating power. This was the opinion opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who in the course of the voyaging company with Rabbi Joshua explained to the latter, when frightened by the sudden appearance of a brilliant light, that it probably proceeded from the eyes of the Leviathan. In modern usage, however, the term Leviathan has come to refer to anything, specifically any sea monster, and from the early 17th century has also been used to refer to overwhelmingly powerful people or things, including Moby Dick.
Coming in at number 5, we've got deep blue sharks. You could make an argument that these are just normal sharks, but that argument would be wrong. It would be like saying that the shark from Jaws was just a regular shark. And not even Bruce had the brain capacity to take down an entire aquatic research facility. Let's take a look. The 1999 shark attack thriller Deep Blue Sea was met with mixed reviews, largely due to its heavy use of B-movie plot points. Don't get me wrong, B-movie plot points make the world go round, but listen to this. In Deep Blue Sea, there's a research team trying to find a way to reactivate brain cells affected by Alzheimer's disease. For whatever reason, the scientists landed on using mako sharks. What makes a shark brain special? Who knows? So these Alzheimer's sharks are hanging out in some holding tanks, having brain tissue removed and so on. Then one wakes up, bites a man's arm off, and then yanks a helicopter out of the air. Huh. As it turns out, these scientists have genetically modified these sharks to have bigger brains in order to ensure they can harvest enough gray matter to do their research. And these bigger brains have enabled the dead-eyed predators to become smarter and more deadly than ever. How do they even manage that? You can just make brains bigger now? Imagine that, making a shark so smart that it could take your place in the food chain. Incredible stuff. Following this reveal, these sharks are nothing but bad news. They kill plenty of people, all while sabotaging control panels, cutting off exits, and generally making a big mess of the research facility. Those big brains really get put to work. So if you didn't already have this recurring nightmare, you can now add brainy fish to your laundry list of fears. Coming in at number 4, we've got umibozu. We'll take a quick break from movie monsters for a moment and examine a terrifying mythological monster. This sea spirit is included in the ever-interesting category of Japanese creatures known as yokai. It will appear when waters are at their calmest and absolutely wreck ships. Isn't that just cruel? When the going is easy, it decides to provide its own type of storm. They appear to be large black humanoid figures. Different sizes have been cited, but they're often tens of meters tall. Legends may vary by location, but a common story is that of an umibozu rising from the water and demanding a bucket or barrel from the sailors. If you hand it one of these containers, it will then drown you. It's been said that the only way to escape one, if it doesn't wreck your ship immediately, is to hand it a bottomless barrel and sail away when it's confused. Many people believe that umibozu sightings are simply the result of seafaring folk incorrectly seeing other naturally occurring phenomena. It could very well be clouds or other large sea organisms. Still, you don't want to take any chances with giant paranormal monsters. The origins of the umibozu are murky at best, and there are no stories that clearly depict its creation or first appearance. However, some say that they are the spirits of dead priests that were tossed into the waters. Their bodies have nowhere to rest, so their souls haunt the ocean, dooming anyone who crosses them. Sheesh. Coming in at number 3, we've got Gillman, also known as the creature from the Black Lagoon. It's hard to look at this classic creature nowadays without conjuring up the many, many other beasts that paid homage. Swamp Thing, Davy Jones's crew, and of course the amphibian man from The Shape of Water. Hollywood was shaped by this slimy, girl-chasing man-beast. Sure, it seems campy and done to death at this point, but way back when, it was a thrilling icon. After discovering a fossil linking land and sea animals, a team of researchers decide to stick around in the Amazon to find more. When the leader leaves camp, Gillman appears. Green and greasy and curious as a child, he infiltrates the camp and kills 2 expedition members in self-defense. And thus begins a strange game of cat and mouse, or researcher and monster and beautiful woman. Gillman has the ability to overpower just about any human in a fight, to swim at unheard of speeds, and of course to breathe underwater. All of this combined with a lust for human female makes him a terrible beast indeed. Sure, it can be argued that Gillman is just misunderstood, an idea that Guillermo del Toro would later explore in more detail, but for the average moviegoer and upholder of the status quo, it was a terrifying beast indeed. The rubber suit may be cheesy, but it's stuck in the collective minds of theater attendees around the world. Coming in at number 2, we've got The Host. Before Parasite, Bong Joon-ho was still putting out movie after masterful movie. In some way or another, they were all about monsters too. Memories of Murder was about a boogeyman, Snowpiercer was about men who would exploit all sorts of people to keep a semblance of order, Okja was about the ever-ravenous food industry. But looking at The Host, it's a movie about a literal monster, and that's pretty much it. There's plenty of commentary about other things in the world, like how the powers that be can be straight up evil, and about how war can have lingering effects long after conflict ends, and also about how the youngest and weakest of us need to be protected. But in the end, The Host is just a crazy monster movie, and the monster is awesome. Apparently it was based on Steve Buscemi too. Who would have thunk? This slimy, bipedal, prehensile tailed beast runs throughout urban Korea, swallowing people whole and disappearing into the water like it's nothing. People unload entire magazines of bullets into it, shoot at it with sporting bows, toss Molotovs, and even unleash terrifying chemical agents, and it still runs around eating children. It's a freaky, straightforward monster with a million slippery folds making up its mouth. And at any given moment, it might regurgitate any number of things. Even if the 2006 era digital effects don't quite hold up, it's still fascinating to look at. And finally, at number 1, we've got Godzilla. Come on, you didn't think I'd leave the granddaddy of all kaiju off this list, did ya? Walking straight up out of the ocean to level entire cities, Godzilla is the archetypal aquatic monster. The roar, iconic. The silhouette, iconic. The destruction, iconic. Without Godzilla, we wouldn't have any other kaiju either. Say bye-bye to the ocean-spawning beasts from Pacific Rim. Sayonara to all the crazy monsters the Super Sentai and Power Rangers fight. Bye-bye to the Cloverfields, Gameras, and Mega Sharks. Godzilla is the aquatic monster. A prehistoric sea creature given power by nuclear radiation, this upright reptilian is a force to be reckoned with. Described by a doctor in the original film as a transitional creature somewhere between marine and terrestrial, there's nowhere to hide from Godzilla. It's taken many forms over the years, but retains most of its classic features: the furrowed brow, rough scales, long tail, and enormous legs. Sometimes it even takes a while to evolve to that point, like in Shin Godzilla. It has atomic breath, which it uses to vaporize anything it wants. Different iterations feature magnetism, fireballs, laser beams, flying, and electric bites too. So if you're ready for one form of Godzilla, there's dozens more waiting in the wings to test the populace in new, destructive ways. King of the monsters, right?